Tom here from Metalloud, and welcome to part 2 of the Say Anything review series. This time we're going to be skipping ahead a little bit to their kind of big breakthrough album, Is a Real Boy. So Say Anything Is a Real Boy is probably their best known album that they've done. It's their biggest album. It was also their kind of breakout album where everyone really started to talk about Say Anything. They hit the scene with the single Alive with the Glory of Love, and that music video was played constantly, and that really got a lot of people interested in talking and Is a Real Boy, to the point where a lot of people only listen to this album and don't actually listen to anything else, which to me is kind of a mistake. They have a lot of great work, but there's honestly people out there who only listen to this album, and there's people that constantly keep asking them to go back to this album. Now, where this came from, where they had the release of Baseball, there were a couple EPs between Baseball and Now, with Is a Real Boy, and they kind of started to gain some underground popularity. Like I mentioned in the Baseball review, the song Colorblind was shared around off of one of their EPs. The song Walk Through Hell kind of got pretty big. I knew that song before I even knew who Say Anything actually were, and that was kind of one of their first real breakout songs in general. But this was an album that really kind of put them on the map. And I kind of mentioned in Baseball, I criticized it for the production on that album, that it was kind of poor. The songwriting felt a bit juvenile. It was a high school album, and it kind of felt like that. I didn't feel like Max Bemis really had anybody guiding him in the songwriting process. Is a Real Boy is kind of a whole different ballpark. It's a complete change from Baseball, from their EPs, and it really does just explode out of nowhere with this band. They really kind of had a grasp on indie rock, and they did something that not a lot of other bands were doing. A lot of other bands around this time, 2004, when this album released, anytime in that time period, it felt like a lot of the music was, especially in indie rock in particular, it felt like a lot of it was trying to kind of out-witty lyric each other. They felt like a lot of the songs were kind of written just for the clever lines, and specifically that's all that the songs were written for. And Say Anything really kind of had some real grounded lyrics and some fantastic metaphors, and really Max Bemis did a great job with just creating a picture in your head with his lyrics. They weren't just clever lines strung together. They really did have a impact. They told a story. This was written actually as a concept album. It doesn't do a great job in that aspect. I mean, you kind of get it, but not so much. I think that kind of fell apart. I'm not sure if in the end he really actually even went with that. I know it was written that way, at least in the start. But this album really, lyrically especially, is it's kind of stand out. These are probably some of the catchiest and just best lyrics that have ever been written down for indie rock or anything like that. And musically, actually, this is another fantastic album musically, because they managed to take indie rock and mix in, there's hardcore underneath, there's some keyboards and synth work in there, there's a lot that's going on, and it's very chaotic, and yet at the same time, amidst all that chaos, there's melodies, there's harmonies, there's catchy tunes that are just going to stay stuck in your head, all in all, and it really just works together. I mean, this is an album that kind of, I get why people like this album so much, and kind of why they hope Say Anything sounds like this again, or why they really only like this album, because it really is just a perfect storm of everything. And I don't think they could make another album like Is a Real Boy. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because they've gone on to do more, which obviously I'll get to, but this album really is just something unique from the band for the time in the industry, and it's just something that I really don't think could be necessarily repeated. On this album, everything feels like it was thought out. Every switch up, every tempo change. You have songs here where listening to the first part of the song and skipping, few seconds in, you're not going to recognize the same song. Like the ending track, admit it, the beginning of that compared to the end of it's just a completely different song, and it's great for that. That's part of why it's such a awesome track. I mean, besides the lyrics on that one where Max Bemis was basically criticizing hipsters before hipsters were even a thing, trying to tell everyone else what music was cool and in and what fashion trends are in and everything like that, and saying that that's just the same shit we go through in high school now outside of it and our community, and that it's not something that we should really be focusing on, and he kind of rails against that in a fairly long song, and at the same time he doesn't even leave himself out of it, which is part of another reason why a lot of people identify with this album. Is it's very introspective, and it's very kind of self-loathing at times, and that really works. I feel a lot of people who listen to this album love this album. That's where they were at this point in their life when this came out. I can say for sure I was in 2004, high school freshman, and this album really did kind of speak to me with the lyrics that he was putting down, and it had that at the same time it was that kind of upbeat, energetic indie rock fused with punk music that really kind of caught my ear at that time, and I think that's a lot of reason why people still like this album and why it stands up as being one of their best albums, and a lot of people's minds it is their best album. So on all, this is a extremely ambitious album from the band, and it really does just show what they can do when everything comes together. When Max gets his lyrics down right, and he actually wrote most of this album, which is something people really I don't think understand, is that Say Anything is mostly Max Bemis. He's done most of the songwriting. The other members of the bands really kind of performed them, but he wrote most of them, along with on this album Kobe Linder, who did the drumming for it and also contributed to the songwriting process. But it is a lot of just Max Bemis doing it. So for him to kind of put this out there, it is something that is special, and I think this album really does kind of hold up as not just a great Say Anything album, but a great album from 2004, especially in the time where people were labeling everything as emo, anything that sounded like this, and that's not what it was, but I think they really kind of managed to do something that was unique in the scene at that time and kind of stand out amongst these same bands, and these even a lot of the bands that I enjoy today were still kind of, like I said, it felt like they were in competition to come out with just clever lines strung together with some music in the background, and that's what a lot of it felt like, whereas this album and Say Anything just really feels like a cohesive album, and everything feels like it was done with a purpose. So Say Anything is a real boy. If you haven't heard it by now, you really, really need to hear this, whether you're whatever music you're into. If you're into poppy rock, if you're into punk, if you're into just mellow emo music or anything like that, this is something you should take a listen to. It really holds up over time, and even if it's your first time listening to it, I feel like this is an album that you really will enjoy. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this video, the review of Say Anything is a Real Boy. I want to know what you guys think. Do you like this album? Do you not like this? What do you think of Say Anything as a band? Leave me a comment down below. I always love hearing from you guys. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more.